The People's Platform.
Good evening and welcome to the People's Platform. According to the World Health Organization, sexual health is a state of physical, mental and social well-being in relation to sexuality. It requires a positive and a respectful approach to sexuality and sexual relationships, as well as the possibility of having pleasurable and safe sexual experiences free of coercion, discrimination and violence. A Sunday Times article said that there are a large number of people who suffer in silence due to sexual health issues, which, if left unaddressed, would become disastrous for both the individual and society. Sexual medicine is integrated across a range of medical disciplines, including urology, gynecology, primary care, sexually transmitted infections, endocrinology, psychology, and other specialities. In Sri Lanka, there is a significant lack of prioritization when it comes to sexual health, largely stemming from prevalent societal stigma as well as shame associated with the topic. Neglecting sexual health has severe repercussions for society, highlighting an urgent need for addressing these issues. So let's have the conversation. I'm so pleased to welcome back to the studio Dr. Rashmira Balasuriya, Director, ACA Initiative, also Technical Advisor, Advocacy Unit of the Family Planning Association of Sri Lanka. Rashmira, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me, Sonali.
Absolutely. Rashmira, first I thought we could discuss the landscape pertaining to cervical cancer. If you could provide an overview of the current landscape of cervical cancer in Sri Lanka, including the factors contributing to its high prevalence among Sri Lankan women.
Sure. So when we're talking about cervical cancer, it's the fourth most commonest cancer in Sri Lanka, but also globally. So it's causing a significant burden. In 2018, more than 1,000 new cases were diagnosed of cervical cancer and more than 600 lives lost to cervical cancer. Now, the thing about cervical cancer is it's one of the only cancers that we can effectively prevent a person from getting. So there are measures in place for us to take better protection, basically, take vaccinations, get screened to prevent cervical cancer from happening. Cervical cancer is a cancer that's more than 99% of cases are caused by a virus called the human papilloma virus. Now, this virus is spread sexually, also through gentle contact. But the issue is we have no symptoms when you get this virus. Right. So a lot of us can even have this virus and have no symptoms and not even know it. Right. The problem happens that a lot of people actually in their lifetime will be exposed to HPV, but our immune system for some people clears it out, but for some people it can cause a persistent infection of HPV. And the HPV virus goes to the cervix in women and it causes changes to the cells of the cervix, right? And in about 10 to 15 years, not today, tomorrow, but 10 to 15 years, these changed cells slowly keep changing further to become cervical cancer. So in terms of prevention, there are a number of things we can do, which I probably discuss in a little bit as well. But that is the issue with cervical cancer, really, and that is the burden that we have at the moment.
What are some of the key barriers that are faced in diagnosing cervical cancer early among women in Sri Lanka?
So like you said, in Sri Lanka, we have so many myths, taboos, stigmas associated with anything pertaining to sexual and reproductive health. And cervical cancer, unfortunately, is kind of pocketed there, and people are scared to come forward, especially because the symptoms of cervical cancer are things like vaginal discharge, bleeding after having sex, bleeding after menopause even, persistent abdominal pain, foul-smelling discharges, things that a lot of us tend to ignore or are too ashamed to go to the doctor and say, hey, listen, I'm having this kind of a symptom. So a lot of the time, women are reluctant to come forward, and by the time they get diagnosed with cervical cancer, it's quite late. It's spread quite far. So the main issue we have with cervical cancer is because it gets so much stigma and taboo that one thing that I hear often is, if you're promiscuous, then you are most likely to get cervical cancer. And yes, having multiple partners does increase your risk, but even one exposure to HPV, even the first time you have sex ever, and if you even get married to that person, that's your first sexual exposure, that is enough for some people to cause HPV, for cervical cancer.
speak to us about some of the preventative measures, some of the screening programs that are currently available.
Yeah, so like I said, we are lucky in a way that cervical cancer is one of the few cancers that we can effectively prevent a woman from getting. So one main thing is, of course, lifestyle changes that we always advise as doctors. Things like limiting smoking is a cause for all cancers, not just cervical cancer, but smoking is a risk factor for that, as well as things like limiting your number of sexual partners or even using condoms as well. Condoms can protect to a certain extent when it comes to transmission of HPV. There's also, if you think about it, you have this one virus that causes more than 99% of cervical cancers. Then effectively, if we target this virus by a vaccine, you can prevent a lot of people from getting this virus and therefore cervical cancer. And that's what they have done. So there are vaccines that target the most common strains of HPV. Now remember, like COVID, HPV has a lot of strains available. Some cause genital warts, some are more likely to cause genital warts, some more likely to cause cervical cancer. So the vaccines basically target the most common strains of the virus and prevent it from kind of causing a persistent infection and protecting the individual who gets the vaccine. So that is one way that you can prevent it. And in Sri Lanka, actually, young girls aged 10 to 11 are given that vaccine free of charge through the government sector. If you're older, you can still get the vaccine, preferably before you are sexually active, because once you are sexually active, you are already exposed potentially to the virus. So preferably before sexual activity. And you can get that in the private sector, but not in the government sector. The other way that we can actually screen for cervical cancer, or actually precancerous lesions, is by doing regular pap smears. So what we do by pap smear is that we insert a small device into the vagina and we visualize your cervix, it's just there. Take a quick swab of the cells and look under the microscope for any changes that could have happened to those cells. So we're looking for any changed cells before they become cancer cells. So effectively, if you find any of those cells there, we can remove it before it becomes cancer, preventing a woman from, again, being diagnosed with cervical cancer per se. Cervical cancer screening, pap smear screening, is a very simple procedure. It's a 5-minute procedure, but of course, it's 5 minutes of a little bit of discomfort. So a lot of people are reluctant to get it done, but it can literally save your life. In Sri Lanka at the moment, in the government sector, it's done twice in a woman's lifetime, at 35 and at 45, because of resource limitations. But I know some Ministry of Health clinics around the island do it more frequently if you request it. But otherwise, it's available at the Family Planning Association, for instance, at a subsidized price, or in the private sector as well.
Right. Rashmira, for the women watching us, wondering if they too should get pap smears, what message do you have for them?
Yes, definitely get your pap smear. If you are over the age of 25, so in the UK they screen earlier at the age of 25. The WHO recommendation is that from the age of 30 to get screened at regular intervals. So if you are sexually active, even if you've just been sexually active with one partner, get screened, because you never know whether that partner had the HPV, the virus that could be transmitted to you as well. It's a simple 5-minute procedure that can essentially save your life. So I would recommend all women to go and get the pap smears, and if possible, get it done regularly every 3 years or every 5 years. You can speak to your doctor about that and decide on the frequency.
Fantastic. Let's also talk about the importance of creating this public awareness, this public discourse. Cervical cancer is just one of the issues pertaining to sexual health that we need to talk about, but there are so many others. Take us through some of the other issues that we need to draw attention to.
Yeah, so cervical cancer is, like we mentioned, one of the most prevalent problems that we have when it comes to sexual and reproductive health. But in Sri Lanka, we are working on it. The midwives are doing a good job trying to encourage people to come and get their pap smears done. Even my midwife, even though I go to the private sector for healthcare, she calls me and makes sure that I've gone somewhere to get it done.
Right.
So the midwives are doing a great job. If you haven't gotten registered with your midwife, get registered with your midwife, right? In terms of other sexual health disorders, vaginismus is a very common one. Have you heard of that, Sonali?
Of course I have, yeah, but sadly, it's not in the public domain.
Not at all.
Women really struggle with this.
Yeah, so it's approximated about 10% of women I'm sure it's much, much more, have a condition called vaginismus. Vaginismus is basically involuntary contraction of muscles around the vagina, making it virtually impossible or very painful and very difficult to have sexual intercourse. Vaginismus can be managed. There are different factors. There's psychological factors affecting, physical factors as well, but it can be managed. But most women are, afraid to speak up about it, don't know where to go to speak about it, scared of judgment by doctors, by partners. So they suffer in silence, and unfortunately, it can really cause a strain in their relationships, and that can lead to things like depression, anxiety, and it can really just get worse and worse and worse with time. So that is another really common condition, a sexual health dysfunction. For males, erectile dysfunction is common. Again, people are scared to talk about it because they don't want the judgment of, even especially older people. As you get older, men, your chance of having erectile dysfunction also increases.
Right.
But of course, they're scared to come and talk about this because they feel like they will be judged for being elderly and wanting to still have sexual intercourse. Right? So there are so many common conditions that people are suffering with and suffering in silence because of all the sexual health taboos, stigmas attached to it.
How do we bust these myths once and for all, Rashmira? I mean, isn't it exhausting for you working in this sector to just keep doing this work, but then keep being met with backlash?
Yeah, it's definitely an exhausting role, but of course I understand that I have the privilege and I'm bold enough to come and talk about it and encourage people to talk about it. Unfortunately, Sonali, change can't happen overnight, right? Change has to happen slowly and gradually because our Sri Lankan culture is such. I think the first step definitely is, encouraging comprehensive sexuality education, encouraging the youth to understand their bodies and be in charge of their bodies, have that autonomy, something that the older generation doesn't have. And also by more awareness, more sessions, information being spread, whether it's leaflets, social media, whether it's print media or even TV media, having awareness programs like this can really help get the message across that if you don't have to suffer in silence. Sexual health is very important to a person, even though we don't talk about it, whether you're a youth person or whether you're an elderly person. Sexual health is still a significant component of your life. And if you are having issues with it, there is help available. It might be difficult to find where to navigate, where to go for, but your primary care doctor, your GP, is a good start because that person can then direct you to another doctor if needed or even handle it by themselves.
All right, fantastic. We are in conversation with Dr. Rashmira Balasuriya. We're going for a break. We'll be right back.
The People's Platform. Singharaja, Sri Lanka's precious world heritage.
Most awaited Alut Ardu celebrations. Wellawaya, be ready.
බින්දුවටම ප්‍රතික්ෂේප කරපු සමහර දේශපාලන ප්‍රවාහයන් ආයෙනවා. කලාව නාව. ඒකෙත් කලාවක් තියෙනවා. ඒක කලාව. ඒ මොකක්ද ඒක? කොහොමද ඒක කියවන්නේ?
තරුණයෝ ඉල්ලුවේ සිස්ටම් චේන්ජ් එක. ඒක උනේ නෑනේ.
ඒක හදන්න මිනිස්සු ඉන්නව නැත්තේ නෑ.
IMF එකෙන් ණය ගත්ත හැකි. ඔව්. ආර්ථික කඩාවැටීම. මේ සංස්කෘතික කඩාවැටීම සිදු වුණාන් පස්සේ අපි කාගෙන්ද ණයට ගන්න කියන ප්‍රශ්නේ තියෙනවා.
මොකක් හරි කරගෙන කාට හරි ගෙයිමක් දීලා කීයක් හරි හොයාගෙන ඉන්න නම් පුරුෂාර්ථය හැදිලා තියෙන ජීවිතේ එතනින් එහාට යාගේ හියුමන් ලයිෆ් එකේ ගමනක් නෑනේ.
මිනිස්සු ප්ලෑන් කරපු ජීවිත නැති වෙලානේ හැමෝටම තමන්ගේ ජීවිතය අහිමි.
ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදයේ දරිද්‍රතාවයක් කියනවා. Poverty of democracy.
බුද්ධිමය සංවාදය බ්‍රහස්පතින්දා රාත්‍රී 10:30 මාවත. TV1 TV Pulse.
Former President Sirisena appears before CID, gives 5-hour statement. Justice Minister elaborates on a proposal to amend the election system. Election or not, RW will have to leave, Anura Kumara says in Canada. Will the SLPP form a government with Ranil? Prime Minister in China on an official visit. Nutritious meals for primary students. 2024 school meals program launched. Sri Lanka beat Bangladesh to win the first test and take the series lead.
Evasive action, he tried to take the bottom hand, came off the bat.
TV1. TV for life.
On our next episode, explore the VIP car wreck. Mysteries of the ocean floor. Sea of Sri Lanka. Saturday at 6:30 p.m. exclusively on TV1.
ජනාධිපතිතුමාගේ විදිහට අපි ගොඩද
මේ ප්‍රතිපත්ති රාමුවත් මේකත් හිස් වූ රාමුවක්
නායකෙක්ට පුළුවන් අවශ්‍යයි නම් සංවේදීත් වෙලා ඒ වෙලාවෙම තාර්කිකත් වෙන්න
ජානමය හේතුත් බලපාන්න පුළුවන් ද සමහර වෙලාවට මානසික තත්ත්ව වෙනස් වෙන්න
මානසික රෝගයක් 80%ක් ජානගතයි 120ක් එන්වයරන්මන්ට් එකේ ඉන්නේ
නින්දේදිත් සිදුවෙන ශ්වසන අපහසුතාවන් පිළිබඳ අපිට වාර්තා වෙනවා මේක ගොරවනකොට වැඩි වෙනවද
නින්දේදී සිදුවන ශ්වසන අවහිරතාවය නැත්නම් මේක හඳුන්වනවා මේ ඔබස්ට්‍රක්ටිව් ස්ලීප් ඇප්නියා කියන තත්ත්වය
ජාතික මෙහෙවර සතියේ දිනවල උදෑසන 11ට
The People's Platform.
Welcome back. My guest tonight is Dr. Rashmira Balasuriya. Rashmira, I was going through a Nat Geo article yesterday that said that health research has historically overlooked women, especially women of color, but new research is finally yielding biological insights that are leading to better diagnosis and treatments from ADHD to the leading causes of maternal mortality. Researchers are only now beginning to fill in the gaps on women's health concerns.
Yeah.
Speak to us about how crazy it is that women get sidelined.
Isn't it nuts that nobody spoke about this before?
Yeah.
So even myself, when I was in medical school, going through research, that's what we learn, evidence-based medicine. We didn't realize that most research, the participants are male. So even the effects of, for instance, painkillers, they affect women differently. Women are much more complex in terms of the hormones that we have, the receptors we have, and it's now being found that that is probably one reason why even female pain, menstrual pain, is not taken as that much, so serious.
Because
but
they don't have it.
They don't have it, but they also don't realize that the average painkiller affects women differently. So maybe this painkiller is not going to work on this woman. For instance, maybe she needs something stronger. So yeah, it's really nuts. But I think now newer research that's coming through make sure that the participants are equal, so they understand the effect of a new drug, for instance, on both men and women.
Right, so the equitability is more.
Somewhat, not all research. Again, people have to really look at research critically now and appraise it very critically to see the study participants, whether there was equal in terms of gender, in terms of race as well, for instance. We're all genetically different, so it's important that we understand that as well.
Rashmira, I'd like your perspectives on postpartum mental health, because it's a key issue faced by so many thousands, hundreds of thousands of women, but again, the discourse is not mainstreamed. So after delivery, women go through so many changes from their bodies to how they are viewed and perceived in society, their identity, all of these things. Speak to us about mainstreaming this discourse surrounding postpartum mental health, because women go through a lot after delivery?
Yeah, so when, during pregnancy as well, right? The woman's body is changing, the woman's hormone levels are changing. But after you deliver a baby, those hormone levels that have been nicely rising and you've given you great hair, great complexion, suddenly come crashing down.
Right.
On top of that, you also have this new human being to take care of, this new baby who depends on you, eats, sleeps, needs you for everything. And the mental load that women go through is humongous, something that unfortunately their male partners might not be able to understand. And also historically, we have this patriarchal view that all women go through it. So why can't you just get through it? Why can't you just go through it? Regardless of the mental aspect, the psychological impact that this new baby is having on you. So a lot of people expect women to just get up and get on with it, right? And I heard this quote recently that said, everyone wants to hold the baby, but nobody holds the mother. And that can't be further from the truth, right? Because when you're pregnant, everyone wants to, give you care, tender, loving care. But once the baby comes out, the mother is just forgotten. And it's all about the baby. And mothers go through things, the baby blues, which is a very common thing that a lot of mothers go through, is very common, but so is postpartum depression, so is postpartum anxiety, so is postpartum rage. And these things are not spoken about. So when women experience this, they're just wondering, what on earth is going on with me? So for instance, I went through postpartum depression. Even though I'm a doctor, I thought I knew what to expect. I had major postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety. And I didn't realize what intrusive thoughts were until I had postpartum anxiety, and you get these thoughts that are obviously not your own, but you're thinking, what if I drop the baby down the stairs? What if I drop the baby? It's just such ridiculous thoughts, but these are what's in your head.
Yeah.
And at least because I was a doctor, I knew these were intrusive thoughts. I knew I needed to speak to a psychologist. But I can't imagine what a lay person goes through, because they have no idea how these thoughts got into their head.
Right.
And postpartum psychosis is also something we don't talk enough about. We think only like 1 in 1,000, 1 in 2,000 women will experience it. But that is actually quite common, and now it's increasing further. Postpartum psychosis is when people literally have a psychotic breakdown about being a new mother, dealing with the hormones, dealing with this new baby. And postpartum mental health is definitely not spoken much about. But I think slowly but surely in Sri Lanka, they're realizing the importance of taking care of our mothers once the baby comes out. Because that village of support that was traditionally there in Sri Lankan cultures is no longer there always. People are working. Fathers don't get paternity leave. They have to go back to work almost immediately after the baby is born. So this new mother is often left on their own. So definitely things have to change when it comes to postpartum mental health.
What is the role of the husband or the partner in this regard?
So a lot of there are some men out there who are amazing, very supportive of their, their wives. They've just become new mothers, taken on a great, huge, challenging life role, right? But a lot of partners out there also simply don't understand what their wife is going through, right? Or their girlfriend or partner, whoever, what they're going through. And the reason that happens is because men are largely excluded from the conversation. Even during the pregnancy, men are not included. They're not told that this can happen. Or your wife is going to have a baby, but she's going to bleed for the next 4 to 6 weeks. And that is normal. Her legs are going to swell up. That is normal. She's going to experience rapid postpartum hair loss. That is normal. She's going to have these fluctuations in mood changes. She's going to have these hormones, these night sweats. They're not informed about this. So they largely also do feel excluded because nobody told them. Nobody told the mother either, but also the husband. So I think one aspect, and I was speaking to a private hospital recently about how we can address this. And one thing that we came up with is that the father is informed about postpartum mental health. He's informed of the signs to look out for when it comes to postpartum depression, because the mother might not have the insight to realize that she's going through something, psychological, something different. So the importance of involving the partner and involving him in terms of looking out for the mother.
I feel like this really needs some state intervention, and that's not happening at the moment.
Again, when you think about Sri Lanka, we are a resource-limited country. There's only so much that our government healthcare sector can do. And I must commend the midwives. They are doing the best they can. So the midwives have a questionnaire. They have the Edinburgh postnatal depression scale, which is used to kind of pick up on symptoms that a woman might be experiencing that could lead her to have a more, a major depression or a moderate depression. And so there are steps basically. If the midwife comes to a certain number on that questionnaire, she then upgrades that woman to see a psychiatrist. There are perinatal, there are mother maybe units all across the country as well. So if a woman has severe depression or postpartum psychosis, she can be moved to a mental care unit with her baby. So she's not separated from her baby.
Sure.
Yeah, they're both taken together. So she sees a baby, it helps with their recovery.
Shame is something that prevents us from experiencing the full extent of our humanness, Rashmira. What do we do regarding that?
I think mental health in general, there's a lot of shame attached to it, right? There's so much shame when it comes to talking about our feelings, talking about, negative experiences, about trauma, for instance. So mental health per se has this connotation of like being shameful, something we don't speak about, which is suffer in silence. Unfortunately, the only way to combat that is to talk about it, which is why I always, as much as possible, say, listen, it happened to me, it can happen to anybody. And there's no shame in it. Just because I'm a doctor doesn't mean that I'm not a human, that I didn't go through postpartum depression, that I didn't go through postpartum anxiety. And I think the way to break that down, to prevent the shame or to work on the shame really, to remove that from our society, is to talk about it.
Finally, what are some of the gaps or loopholes that you see in our healthcare system pertaining to sexual health, which maybe private sector stakeholders can do something about?
Yeah, so again, like I said, we are a very resource limited country. The government healthcare sector is doing the best it can with the resource available. Sure. But of course, there are gaps. For instance, when it comes to pap smear screening, we have a very poor pap smear screening uptake. For instance, at the age of 35, in 2022, I believe, only 50% of women were screened for cervical cancer. At the age of 45, only 30% were screened.
As in, these women didn't go to the hospitals to get it done, or there was no awareness?
The emerged clinic. So there are so many different factors, and actually one of the research studies I'm working at the moment is looking at factors that affect a woman's attitude and perception when it comes to pap smear screening. If she went for screening, why did she go? What factors influenced her to go? Sure. If she didn't go, why not? Was she pregnant? Was she embarrassed? Was she ashamed? Was the clinic times inconvenient to her? Because the emerged clinics in Sri Lanka offer this free of charge.
Right.
The midwife comes to your house, reminds you, calls you, tries to get you down to come. So why aren't you going? Right. So we are trying to understand at the moment why there's such a poor uptake for pap smear screening, cervical cancer screening in Sri Lanka. The other thing, of course, is the introduction of newer technology, newer methods now for pap smear, for cervical cancer screening. There's a test called HPV DNA, which the UK has. A lot of countries have moved on from pap smear screening into this HPV DNA, which is much more accurate.
Okay.
But it's very expensive in Sri Lanka.
Right.
So that's something where I think where the private sector can encourage women to come and get that done as well if they have it at a more affordable rate, for instance.
All right. And finally, if we can leave our women and men a message on the importance of really owning your sexuality and your sexual health.
I think knowledge is power, right? So I strongly believe that you need to be more informed about sexual health. So reading anywhere, whether it's speaking to your doctor, speaking to your GP even, just asking them questions, because they should be able to give you an answer. We've all been trained in this. And they can, guide you to more, sources where you can find out more information, whether it's on the internet, whether it's speaking to a more specialized doctor. There are a lot of avenues available. So I would strongly advise all our citizens in Sri Lanka to make their sexual health a priority and not suffer in silence.
Rashmira, this was very comprehensive. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me, Sonali.
Thank you for watching us. We'll see you again tomorrow. Good night.